people who are troubled by this have to be as intense and as organized and as adamant about this issue as folks on the other side who are absolutists and think that any gun safety measures are somehow an assault on freedom or communistic or a plot by me to, take over and stay in power forever or something. I mean, there are all kinds of crackpot conspiracy theories that float around there, some of which, by the way, are ratified by elected officials in the other party on occasion. So we've got to change the politics of this.
That was President Obama earlier today attacking the GOP on the issue of gun control during remarks at a press conference. He doubled down on his demand for new laws in the wake of the Oregon shooting, despite the fact that the guns we now know were owned legally and that school was a gun-free zone. Joining me now, Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke and Jeremy Byrd, who served as National Field Director during President Obama's 2012 campaign. Thank you both for being here. Jeremy, let me start with you.
Thanks for having us, Megan.
What specifically could have been changed? What gun law could have been changed that would have prevented this shooting?
Look, I'm not sure, is the honest answer, right? Each one of these incidents is completely unique. What we do know, though, is over the last several years, we continue to see this kind of violence, these kinds of mass shootings all over our country. And what the president was saying, both last night and today, is that inaction is just not an option. And we know that states that have these laws in place that make it harder for people with mental illness, that make it harder for folks, that make people get background checks, it reduces gun violence. And so we need to do everything we can to save any lives we can.
Let me ask you this. But we've seen cities like Chicago that have some of the strictest gun laws in the country with the worst crime in the country and the most gun deaths. So how do you square that?
Yeah, look, so I think we need a national background check law here, and guns are going to cross borders.
But background check doesn't necessarily detect mental health problems.
Well, it would help. It would be one step. See, the problem here is that there are steps that we can do to decrease this. We're not going to solve it all. We need a comprehensive approach to solving this problem. But we need to do something and stop just saying that the status quo is okay, because it's not.
Okay. Sheriff Clarke, let me ask you. President Obama said we can't sort through and identify ahead of time who might take actions like this. The only thing we can do is make sure they can't have an entire arsenal when something snaps in them. It sounds like he's given up on the mental health piece of it.
Well, first of all, we have ample evidence of the president usurping his authority under the Constitution in relation to what he just said. Look, I get tired of being lectured by somebody who has basically a platoon of armed individuals that cover him and his family, and rightfully so, but on a daily basis, while he expects the rest of us here at ground level, average citizens, ordinary citizens, to have to outsource their personal safety to the government. I'll answer your question, what law could be changed. We should get rid of these gun-free zones. We should allow people, under certain circumstances, concealed carry license holders, to be able to play a role in their own safety. I think it's heartless to expect people in these gun-free zones to be lined up and slaughtered with no way to defend themselves. These gun-free zones have become killing fields. That is the one constant in all of these mass murders, including the military recruiting section, section where
Sheriff?
The President of the United States doesn't even trust soldiers stateside to go armed.
But what do you think is the solution? Because this guy, he had some issues, some mental issues, but it doesn't look like he'd been in and out of treatment programs or hospitals or something that would have popped up on a background check. It has to be really severe for it to come up on the back. So what are your thoughts on how we prevent somebody like this, who isn't really in the system for mental health issues, from getting a gun?
Yeah, there's no panacea here. There are no absolutes. Here's some things that I think might work, though. First of all, we're not going to ever eliminate the likelihood of something like this happening again, okay? Unfortunately, we're an open society. But here's what I think should happen. Citizens should be allowed, under the Constitution, they have that right anyway, to play a role in their own personal safety. The only thing that stopped that incident yesterday was when a good guy, a police officer with a gun, showed up, and they were able to neutralize that homicidal maniac. But as you know, Megan, it was too late. The carnage had already occurred. So if somebody, what we can do is mitigate. In other words, this guy comes into the class and starts lining people up. 1, 2, 3 people, even an armed security guard. I think this is the craziest thing in the world for a student to have to rely on an unarmed security guard for their safety. But if there's 1, 2, or 3 people with a firearm in that classroom, a lot of that carnage could have been avoided. Not all of it, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe he gets off a shot or two, and then that's about it.
Guys, thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
Well, while the gun control debate is in full swing again, did you hear much discussion today about how the shooter specifically targeted Christians? Up next, we'll take a look at that issue. Plus, a new poll out today suggests more changes for the Republican field. We'll show you why Jeb Bush is suddenly the center of attention and what it means for the rest of these candidates.
If I don't toot my own horn, who's going to toot it? You know, of course my record is one that I'm proud of.